history of usability in UX, we see that usability has a longer history. The value of usability started to become more pronounced when the tools that we developed started to run up against our cognitive and physical limitations. One of the earliest and best examples of this happening was in aviation during World War I. The planes from this time were cutting-edge technology with very new design elements. They were expensive pieces of equipment, and their pilots were very hard to train due to the physical demands as well as the complexity of the planes. It was crucial to minimize human errors as much as possible. By the end of World War I, human usability testing labs were born to conduct studies on pilots in the United States. The early years of usability focused on finding the right kind of people to the jobs, as opposed to making equipment more user-friendly. But WW2 showed that strategy of finding a few good men for the precious aircrafts was not good enough. It was learned that humans should not be selected for the expensive and complex machine, but the machine should be built around the humans and their capabilities. This way, more humans can control less complex machinery, allowing for more potential users that can effectively utilize the system. From this, the notion of human-centered design was born. One of the most important tenets of this principle is that the human should not be to blame when a mistake is made. It should be the fault of the design of the system. However, as is often the case, it's hard to learn from the mistakes of history, and so it repeats itself. A very similar problem occurred during the commercialization of more consumer-level products. For example, the early printers were large, room-sized machines that required a decent amount of expertise. One of the biggest companies at the time, Xerox, marketed their printers as simple machines, which required only the press of a button. But in reality, that's not often the case.
Now, here, I'm going to just do this. Place 1 to 50 originals, but wait a minute, I have 100 originals. Face up. Place all originals against the left wall. We want two-sided copies. Unload top paper tray. Now, do we want them collated? What? Reverse order the originals? You gotta be kidding. This is definitely a bug. Press start.
Does that relate to that?
Unload top paper
We didn't do
tray.
that. That's not this. That's not the paper tray. It doesn't say what the paper tray is. Huh?
Unload top.
Did you reset?
Oh, shit. So now,
You just started it all over again, so it doesn't remember that it's doing this on the other side or anything. Huh? Maybe it just knows it anyway. So our first batch
our first,
is SOL.
what is that?
Shit out of
I knew it was going to be something clever like that.
I learned that when I was in here.
Well, we sure did come up with a lot of paper.
This recording was made in 1983 by Austin Henderson and Lucy Suchman. They were computer scientists and PhD students in anthropology at UC Berkeley, respectively at that time. In the video, they are attempting to use a brand new Xerox high-speed copier. The two researchers who are trying to use the machine are Ron Kaplan and Alan Newell. Both are famous in their studies in the field of computer science, artificial intelligence, and cognitive psychology. But this footage shows that even if you are a world-class AI expert, a seasoned technician, or a doctorate engineer, you can still face problems while using a simple copier. This is not an issue of people being not clever enough, but a severe lack of clear and understandable design of products. That's why everybody needs usability. Pitfalls in usability may not always be harmless to the people as the previous copier case. For example, the China Syndrome movie about a fictional nuclear power plant in California, released March 16, 1979 on theaters just 12 days before the real 3 Miles Island nuclear accident that occurred in Pennsylvania. It became the biggest accident in U.S. nuclear power plant history. One of the key reasons behind the scale of the failure was to do with a problem with the control room user interface, which workers believed was indicating something it wasn't. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. As one of the leading researchers in user experience, Don Norman was part of a special team flown in to investigate the potential cause of the 3 Mile Island incident. In his report, he stated that the control room and computer interfaces at 3 Mile Island could not have been more confusing if they had tried. When catastrophes occur, we often do not blame bad design, but instead blame it on the humans and call it human error. Don Norman went on to become a pioneer in an emerging field of what became known as user-centered design. By the mid-90s, there were only 60 million computers around the world. Don Norman joined Apple as a user experience architect, the first known use of the phrase user experience in a job title. When asked on why he chose this term, he explained that he invented the term because he thought human interface and usability were too narrow. He wanted to cover all aspects of the person's experience within a system. Human-computer interaction through devices such as our mobile phones is at a scale like never before. In the year 2000, the number of people with access to the internet was 740 million. 10 years later, in 2010, it more than doubled to 2 billion. Today, that number is more than half of the world's population, 4.6 billion. More than 90% of these people accessed the internet via mobile devices. Letting users' behavior dictate the UX of your product is the essence of user-centered design. For example, to become a designer who understands the people's needs using the power of desire may be a good way to get started. And technology can help designers track desire on devices through things such as heat maps, cookie tracking, or analytical tools that can be used to discover patterns and desire lines. When humans interact with computers and technology, good user experience can save lives in extreme situations. Even in mundane usability cases, it can minimize or just avoid unnecessary physical or mental stress. As you have seen previously, UX is not really a new thing. It has been developing since before the dawn of the internet back in the 80s, and people have been looking to solve similar problems for almost a century. UX design is constantly evolving, and the fascinating journey continues. From artificial intelligence to voice technology, from virtual reality to design without an interface. Today's UX designers face new challenges every day. According to the ISO report on ergonomics of human-system interaction, ISO 924111, usability is an important quality indicator for interactive IT products. It is concerned with the effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction for specific users, goals, and especially environments. When usability researchers started being concerned about not only measures of usability, but also all aspects of a user's experience when interacting with products or services, the science of usability evolved into UX, something more than mere sciences. Hence, UX has developed and spread as science and as an art. In short, usability is a sub-discipline of UX design. Although UX design and usability were once used interchangeably, we are now living in an era where we must understand that usability provides a significant contribution to UX, but is not the entirety of it. When defining usability in his book, Don't Make Me Think, Steve Krug stated that usability really just means making sure that something works well, that a person can use the thing without getting hopelessly frustrated. When something is considered usable, it is assumed that it typically has 5 components. These are learnability, efficiency, memorability, error tolerance, and satisfaction. You can click on items to see their definitions. There is another important quality called utility. Utility refers to the design's functionality. Utility should ensure that the product meets the needs of the user. Usability and utility are equally important and determine whether something is useful. Usefulness doesn't matter by itself, since we don't care how easy something is to do if it doesn't do what we want it to do. It's also no good if the system can hypothetically do what you want, but you can't make it happen because the UI is too difficult. This is called desirability. The combination of usefulness and desirability create user experience. Without utility, there is no user experience. Since UX is a more broad term for user-centered design when compared to usability, to explain this newly accepted concept to the sector, a new style was needed. The solution was created in 2004 by Peter Morville. He is an information architect since 1994 and had observed dramatic changes from Gopher to Google in the last few decades. When his interest shifted from information architecture to UX, he needed a new diagram to illustrate the facets of UX, especially to help his clients understand why they must move beyond usability. With help from his friends, he developed the UX honeycomb. To see how each facet or quality of the user experience is explained, please click on the hexagonal cells. This classic diagram of UX honeycomb was updated in 2018 by Katerina Karagiani. This was needed as the original honeycomb could not show the relation between these cells. Since there is no connection or logic between 7 elements, deconstruction-reconstruction processes did not help students in learning. So, as a first step, the 7 facets were grouped based on how the user interacts with a product, uses, thinks, and feels. Then, they were rearranged within the honeycomb so that the relationship between them became visible. And lastly, color coding and labels made the groupings clear. This optimization shows how people use, think, and feel about a product. You can click on Think, Feel, and Use words to see their explanations. Now for some practice. Read the following statements about normalization and normal forms. Decide whether they are true or false. The number of VR users worldwide today surpasses 200 million and is forecast to further grow. The VR industry has started gaining mainstream popularity with the introduction of Meta's Quest 2 in 2020. Thanks to the marketing power as well as the comparably low price, the market share of Meta within VR is about 90%. By the end of 2025, 22% of the world's population is projected to become a VR user. The question here is how the VR sector affects usability and UX fields, a field that has built its credibility in product design and IT, but not in this newly emerging era of XR. Due to the vastly different medium of its platform, XR technologies require a much more novel approach to their UX design processes. While the basic principles of UX design are the same with traditional mediums, the three-dimensional space of XR poses many challenges. Similar to how the mobile UX design principles in 2015 were experiencing a Wild West period, XR is also going through the Wild West phase in its development. Many technologies and designs need to be tested first and learned from still, so that we can arrive at a simple, satisfying result. Most of the challenges in creating good usability boils down to making good trade-offs. Unlike its predecessors, XR allows for much more freedom with regards to play spaces. Previously, computer and phone screens suffered due to the small amount of available space available to the user. Now, we have a lot more freedom in what we do. However, we can't predict what a user will see all the time. While we have gained the freedom to do so much more, we have also traded it for the user being able to do so much more as well, making their actions unpredictable. The process of testing on XR is not about the process, it's about the logistics. When experts create tasks for people to do and watch the people attempt these tests, they ask for the participants to say what they're thinking of while they work. The researchers need to keep quiet as much as possible and keep the probing UX questions until the end. With apps like any other project that demands good UX, the key is simple. According to Stephen Krug, an UX researcher, a person of average ability and experience should figure out how to use the thing to accomplish something without it being more trouble than it's worth. In the world of application design, great ideas are not sufficient to have a successful app. UX and the design of an app are two important factors to keep your users' engagement at desired levels. To investigate the engagement levels of your users, it is important to look into whether they are able to realize a value from your service or not. A service can be your product, website, app, or a game. It would be better to keep in mind the fact that, as Andrew Chen underlies, the average app loses 77% of its daily active users within the first 3 days after the install. To keep user retention high, UX guides and interface design should be handled carefully. In order to have a high retention rate, users should have an outstanding mobile user experience. To give users the best experience and to make them happy, we have to know the differences between XR UX design and the flat-screen UX design. Although usability guidelines or heuristics cover desktop, mobile, and XR, fundamental differences make some design principles that cannot be uses for all of these. For example, users can be on Meta's Oculus, Apple's Vision, HTC's Vive, or other headsets. All of these headsets use different underlying architectures for their operating systems. Additionally, users can be in a seated position or walking around their room. They may be using pass-through display or a full VR environment. They may try to touch objects and buttons physically or from afar. There are many variables that need to be considered on how a user interacts with your app.